We are going to combine 10.3 and 10.4 into the notes this week, so there will be one assignment and one note packet. So we are still going to be doing hypothesis tests, but this time instead of for a proportion, it's for mean, variance, or standard deviation. So we had our calculator last week for population proportion. We're going to have a calculator, some buttons to push for mean, and then there are actually formulas for variance and standard deviation. So just keep that in mind. So we'll continue to use our calculator to find a p-value, which will be compared to the level of significance to determine whether or not to reject the null hypothesis. So again, the same as last time, if the p-value is less than alpha, then you reject the null, and if it's greater, then you don't reject. So we will use our calculator to find the p-value by going on stat, tests, t-test, and then you'll click data or stats depending on what you're given. So if you're given a list of numbers, you're going to use data. And then if you're given a sample mean and sample standard deviation, you're going to type in what you're given with stat. So it says, note that mu sub 0, you can see that on my calculator, is the mean given in the null hypothesis. And just as a reminder, when it comes to interpreting, rejecting the null hypothesis means to accept the claim of the alternative hypothesis, and not rejecting the null hypothesis means there's not enough evidence to accept the claim of the alternative hypothesis. So I ask you to pause the video and then unpause it once you've read this question, and then we'll talk about it. So the null hypothesis is that the mean height of American males is 69.5, and this researcher is suggesting that the mean of this random sample of 43 people is greater than that. So I am going to use the data that they're giving me to find a p-value. So because they give me in this problem a sample mean and a sample standard deviation, I'll go through the buttons again: stat, tests, t-test, enter, and then if you're highlighted on data, you want to go over to stats and highlight stats. So mu sub 0 is the 69.5 from the null hypothesis. X bar is the sample mean, which is 70.78. The sample standard deviation is 2.77. N is the number, the sample size in this case is 43. And then because the null hypothesis is greater than, I want to make sure that greater than is highlighted. Calculate and draw will both give you the same information. I like looking at draw just because it actually might help us when we can't use our calculator for the next stuff. So they tell me that the p-value is 0.0021. So I am comparing 0.0021 to alpha, which is 0.05, and it is less. So since it is less, we will reject the null hypothesis. So if we reject the null hypothesis, then we accept the claim of the alternative, which so I would say there is enough evidence to conclude that the U.S. presidents are on average are taller than the average American male.